Ho ho, and indeed ho. Welcome back to my world of stuff. It's very nearly Christmas as I'm recording this, 10 days away. One of the highlights of the festive period on TV is the annual Doctor Who Christmas special, which was reinstated last year by Russell T Davies when he introduced Ncuti Gatwa properly in the church on Ruby Road. We hadn't had Christmas specials for a few years. Chris Chibnall's special episodes tended to air on New Year's Day. There hadn't been a festive Doctor Who for quite some time, but he's brought them back. And I thought, as we're coming up to the screening of this year's special, Joy to the World, I thought I would look back at the previous Doctor Who Christmas specials, there's a lot of them, between 2005 and 2016, and rank my favourites. When I looked at the list of titles, it quickly became obvious I wasn't going to be able to rank them all. But I'm going to rank my top 5 Doctor Who Christmas specials and one absolute stinker. Stick around. Okay, welcome back. Doctor Who Christmas. Doctor Who Christmas specials are an interesting creature because they're not Doctor Who. They're not typical of Doctor Who. Because they're Christmas episodes, they tend to have a different remit and a different purpose. They're not part of any ongoing narrative of a series or a series arc. The episodes that are designed to appeal to a wider audience than a typical Doctor Who audience, they are crowd pleasers. They are adventures. They're light, they're breezy, they're Christmassy, they're festive, they're fun. They don't feel like Doctor Who. And that's one of the reasons why they're very often not very good, in my opinion, because they don't reflect what Doctor Who actually is. Doctor Who at its best is an adventure, fantasy, science fiction romp that can be quite dark and quite creepy and quite scary. That's not what Christmas episodes are ever meant to do. They're meant to be light. They're meant to be watched by an audience that perhaps doesn't necessarily usually watch Doctor Who. They are, in some ways, a way to tease people to watch the series by saying, this is what Doctor Who is. It's fun, come and watch us. I don't know how well that works these days with viewing figures and so on. But Doctor Who Christmas episodes are very rarely, / never, the best of Doctor Who. But at their best, they can be an entertaining hour. They can be fun. They can be light and breezy, entertaining. They can have a bit of darkness sometimes. But they're never good examples of what Doctor Who's format is, because they're not meant to be. They're meant to be festive. They're meant to be something that won't upset people unduly on Christmas Day. You're not going to have scenes of horror that Doctor Who can do on Christmas Day, because that's not what they're for. So it's difficult to look at the list of episodes, and I looked at the list of episodes and I thought, oh my God, there's some not very good episodes here. You had to go into those Christmas episodes thinking, well, I'll just watch this for what it is. For a bit of entertainment, intended to appeal to a wider audience than just the Doctor Who fanboys. And this is why Doctor Who fanboys and the fan lobby tend to be dismissive of Christmas episodes. Because, as we know, many of the hardcore Doctor Who fans want it to be 1976 again. And it isn't 1976, it's 2024. And Doctor Who is very different, although it's very much the same series. It tells its stories in different ways, it looks very different. So looking at the list of Christmas episodes, I was not looking at a list of classic Doctor Who adventures. And I had to judge them by the standards of what they gave me when I was watching them, how entertained I was when I was watching them. And certainly, and then this is going to sound like another rant about Stephen Moffat, most of his Christmas episodes I found unbearably twee, unbearably dull, sickly, overly humorous, and entirely unmemorable. I'm talking about things like The Snowmen, which in theory it was one of Matt Smith's third Christmas special, and it introduced his new companion Clara, sort of. It had the return of the Great Intelligence, a classic villain from the original series. Instead of Yeti, it manifested living snowmen, one of the most unimaginative designs in Doctor Who monster history. Basically 2 lumps of snow with a snarling face. And it's just not a very good story, it's not a very good episode. And some of the later ones are even worse. Some of the Peter Capaldi episodes are unbearably bad. Last Christmas, which I think involved Nick Frost as Father Christmas. The return of Dr. Mysterio, which had a superhero in it. The Husbands of River Song. Some of these episodes, they just don't work for me. They may well work for you. You may like these episodes. And as a Doctor Who fan, I can't imagine that there are many Doctor Who fans who pick any of the Christmas specials as anywhere near their favourite episodes of Doctor Who. That's very much how I feel. So I've looked at all the episodes. When I say I've looked at them, I've looked at the titles, because a lot of those episodes I am going nowhere near again. To pick the 5 which I think are the most enjoyable, and as I said, one stone cold clunker, which I'll come to at the end. I'm not going to take too long on this, because you'll all have your own choices and you may well disagree with me, and I'd love to know about that. My 5th favourite of the Doctor Who Christmas specials is from 2010. It's A Christmas Carol. It's Matt Smith's first Christmas special. This is the one that features Katherine Jenkins and Michael Gambon in the cast. It is, as the title suggests, a play on Christmas Carol, where the Doctor visits Michael Gambon, who's this miserly ruler of this planet, doesn't like Christmas, doesn't agree with Christmas, tries to ban Christmas. There are sharks in the atmosphere. Amy and Rory are out of the action for most of the time. The Doctor basically has to persuade Sardik that Christmas is a good time, and it's all tied up with his ex-girlfriend, played by Katherine Jenkins, who's placed in cryogenic suspension, I tend to believe. As I said, I haven't rewatched these episodes, so the finer points of the plots are lost in the mist of my memory, and as I said, a lot of them I don't really want to revisit. This was the best of Stephen Moffat's episode. I mean, even here, the show was moving into this fairy tale era that Stephen Moffat was ushering the show into. And you can see signs of it, distinct signs of it here, because this is a very low stakes episode. There's no rampaging monsters, there's no jeopardy, there's no danger really. You get these sharks that are in the fog, but it's very a minor part of the plot. It's very much a sort of a time travel romance story, which is something that Moffat was always very keen on. But it's quite nicely done, it's entertaining. And I think one of the reasons I sort of remember it quite well is it's sort of a personal family reason in a way, because I remember watching this episode with my late mother, who quite liked Katherine Jenkins. And there's that really nice song at the end, which, it just reminds me of watching the episode with my mother and her singing along to the song. And for that alone, I let it go into my 5th place. And it's, it's a decent watch. It's Matt Smith flailing his arms around and running around as he did a lot. But I think it's the least cloying and offensive of those Moffat era Christmas specials. My 4th favourite of the Christmas specials is last year's The Church on Ruby Road, the episode which properly introduced Shutigawa. This again is not a great episode. It shows how Russell T Davies is reshaping the show a bit more, because you've got the goblins and the Goblin King, and it's quite a small story of the Doctor coming back to Earth. He's regenerated, he's finding himself, he wants new friends, he meets up with Ruby, she's a foundling, he's a foundling. It sort of establishes a pattern that's to run through the next series. And goblin creatures appear in our dimension, stealing babies. There's the link back to the mystery of Ruby being left at the church in Ruby Road. It sort of seeds all the stuff that feeds into the following season. And whilst it's not a very high-stakes story, again, there's not a lot going on, it doesn't necessarily, I think, reflect this huge budget that the show's supposed to have now from Disney. I think it's an interesting kicking off point for Shutigawa. He's full of energy, full of life. He brings a lot of energy to the role. Millie Gibson is instantly likeable as Ruby. And of course it seeds other mysteries about Mrs. Flood, played by Nita Dobson. But it definitely has that lightness of touch about it. I mean, the Doctor comes across as... He is... You feel he's the Doctor, but he is definitely a looser version of the Doctor we've had before. He's a free-form Doctor. He's more in touch with himself and his emotions than has been before, as we've again seen in more recent episodes. But it's quite fun. I know a lot of people didn't like the Goblin King and the song, but I thought it was good fun. And of course, again, that too foreshadowed the Devil's Court episode, which had more musical content. And it's the sort of stuff that hardcore Doctor Who fans will detest and will rail against, but I honestly don't mind it that much. And I think it was a good fun episode, and it set up the new Doctor, which is what it was there to do, really. In 3rd place, I'm putting The Next Doctor. This, I think, works quite well because this has actually got an interesting story. The Christmas setting, again, with a lot of these episodes, the Christmas is It's a bit like Christmas decoration. It's there in the background, but it doesn't dominate. The Doctor has lost Donna. He's on his own, a bit lost, and he travels back to the Victorian era, where he meets up with the Doctor, David Morrissey, and his companion Rosita. Initially suspects that this is a future incarnation of himself that he's met up with, but it's actually a bit darker and a bit more interesting than that. David Morrissey is actually playing a character called Jackson Lake, who has come into contact with devices that have embedded in him memories of the Doctor. It's actually quite a dark story in some places. It's quite witty. There's good repartee between David Morrissey and David Tennant, who of course had worked together before in Blackpool, the BBC series. But there are some dark moments in it. I think in particular the graveyard sequence that was filmed in Newport, where the Cybermen emerge out of the snow and electrocute everybody. And that's really quite dark for Christmas Day, and it's done very well, and it reminds me of things like the 10th Planet, where the Cybermen lurched out of the snow. And it is quite dark. And later on in the story, we have the Cybermen who are using child labour to build this ludicrous Cyber King Kong type thing, which stomps about Victorian London. It's a big spectacle, but I think it's an interesting story. We've got Dervla Kirwan as a character called Miss Hartigan, who's there are hints that she's been abused and used by men throughout her life, and now she's turning the tables a bit by allying herself with the Cybermen and helping them create havoc in Victorian London. And then the underlying story then of Jackson Lake, the mystery and tragedy of Jackson Lake. The more I think about the story, actually, the more I'm thinking I want to watch it again, because I think it's very well done. There's some good action in it, but it has what a lot of these Christmas stories don't have, and it's actually a really good story running through it. And of course, there's the red herring that it's the next Doctor, because at this point, David Tennant had announced that he was leaving Doctor Who. And then there's a Christmas special called The Next Doctor, which built up the hype that they were so good at doing back in those days. The Next Doctor's an underrated, good old Doctor Who story, good old Doctor Who Christmas story. In second place, this is going to be controversial because a lot of people dismiss this as trash. But this is very good because it's Doctor Who doing a disaster movie on Christmas Day. It's The Voyage of the Damned. This is the episode that featured Kylie Minogue as Astrid Peth, waitress on a spaceship version of the Titanic, which is circling around Earth at Christmas. Again, the Christmas stuff is the background stuff to the core story, in that the Titanic is bombarded with meteorites. It's a Poseidon adventure in space. I think that's what Russell T Davies described it as at the time. And you've got lots of scenes like that of people trying to reach a different part of the ship which has been crippled, falling into burning chasms, sacrificing themselves. All the stuff of the 70s classic disaster movies, which was exactly what Russell T Davies wanted to do. It is extremely throwaway, but it's very spectacular. The effects look good. Kylie is very good as Astrid, the Doctor's sort of temporary companion. She has a sort of a tragic fate at the end. It's just a fun adventure, and I think that's what he wanted to do, create the equivalent of a Christmas afternoon disaster movie, and I think it's really entertaining. My favourite Christmas Doctor Who episode, though, is the first. And when talking about these episodes, I should have pointed out, I suppose, I'm not including The Feast of Stephen from 1966, because one, it doesn't exist, two, I don't think you've ever seen it. I'm not including Chris Chibnall's episodes because they were New Year's Day episodes, and I'm not even including the Christopher Eccleston Unquiet Dead episode, which was the Charles Dickens episode set at Christmas. I am specifically talking about Christmas Day episodes. And my favourite is the Christmas Invasion. This was David Tennant's first episode in 2005. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. And this is still an exciting, thrilling piece of television because it's set at Christmas, but again, Christmas isn't a big part of the story. It's all about the Doctor regenerating into his new form, being incapacitated, and Rose, played by Billie Piper, stepping up to the plate and sort of carrying the story for a while. And I think that shows the confidence that the production team had, that Rose was so well established that the audience would watch her and her mother and her boyfriend enjoying this adventure with the Doctor out of action most of the time. And it has a feel of the Christopher Eccleston series. It's a bridge between Eccleston and Tennant. Tennant steps in here, but it still feels like part of that first season. It has that newness about it. Doctor Who's still a new thing at this point. And it's an Earth invasion story with these aliens, the Sycorax, giant spaceships above the Earth. The Sycorax aliens, we've got Unit, we've got Harriet Jones, played by Penelope Wilton, returning, Killer Christmas Trees. And the last 20 minutes where David Tennant emerges from his chrysalis of the TARDIS as the Doctor. and indulges in a sword fight with the Sycorax leader, and hints at a certain darkness when he sends the Sycorax leader plunging to his death and says, "I'm no second chances. I'm not that sort of a man." It's a really good story because it feels like a Doctor Who story. Of all these Christmas specials, I would say this is the one that feels most like a Doctor Who story. Certainly in the Moffat era, I think, where there was very little to them, very little meat to the bones. They're very different beasts to a traditional Doctor Who story. The thing about Doctor Who, the magic of Doctor Who, is that every story can be different. You can tell a different type of story. But I think the Christmas episodes go beyond that again by telling a story for people who might not necessarily always watch Doctor Who, but they're slumped in front of the sofa after Christmas dinner and they can't be bothered to turn on Netflix or listen to the radio. So they will watch Doctor Who, and it's not something that's going to make them go, what? With references back to the 70s or the 80s. It's a self-contained story which has nothing to do with whatever Doctor Who's ongoing narrative may be said to be. And I think the Christmas Invasion falls between those two stools in a way. I think it sort of links to the recent past, but yet it's entirely watchable for people who've not watched it before. And it's a great story. It's a great adventure. There's some good bits of humour, and it's a spectacle as well. It's a great episode, and I suppose it's slightly a condemnation of Doctor Who that its best Christmas episode is the first one it's done, but what are you going to do? Yeah, it's a great story. So to my stinker. And there are several I could have picked. I did think about The Husbands of River Song. I thought about the one with William Hartnell's Doctor coming back. But the absolute worst Doctor Who episode, Christmas Doctor Who episode, has got to be from 2011. The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe. Oh my God. I mean, talk about stories that have nothing to them. And this is complete, utter fairy tale. This is, as the title suggests, a rip-off of, or an homage to, perhaps, C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, with the Doctor as a caretaker in this house, looking after this family the father has been killed during the war. And it's this fairy tale thing of this portal that leads to another planet, which is covered in snow. I know these two wooden creatures in a tower. Again, haven't watched this for years. I don't intend to ever watch it again. But it's mind-numbingly boring. Again, there's no jeopardy. There's no threat. They're these wooden things in the tower, but they don't seem to be doing any harm. They're guarding something or other. It's just twee, and I think that's something that sums up a lot of these later Doctor Who. They're very twee. They're very, sweet. But there is no sense of Doctor Who in this, really. Matt Smith is, again, he's spinning his arms around, and there's a bit at the end which is unforgettable. I'm just going to say humany woomany and leave it at that. And if ever I was going to kick my TV screen in, it's hearing Matt Smith looking at characters who are reunited. He saved the father from death somehow by doing something timey-wimey. And he looks across and goes, humany woomany. And I feel my blood boil just thinking about it. So there we are. That's my random look at the Doctor Who Christmas specials. The 5 best, or the ones that I find most enjoyable. Your views will be entirely different. I'm sure you may well think that The Husbands of River Song is a glorious character masterpiece. You may think that Once Upon Time Lord, or whatever it was called, is a wonderful send-off for Peter Capaldi. But we all have different tastes, and I think I've sort of explained why I don't like Stephen Moffat's take on Doctor Who. So it's hardly surprising that his episodes don't figure in my list. Apart from that first one, which I think has sort of an emotional resonance for me personally, and I think it's quite nice. So anyway, that's my 5 favourite Christmas Doctor Who episodes. What I want to know is, what are yours? What are your favourite Christmas Doctor Who episodes? Why not leave a comment down below and let me know? It's the only way we're going to communicate is by you telling me. So let me know what you think about the Christmas Doctor Who episodes, whether you think they're a complete waste of time, or whether you think they serve their purpose as a little bonus bit of vaguely Doctor Who flavoured entertainment for the festive period. Let me know your favourites of the 15 or so we've had since the show came back. Keep it clean, of course. Keep it clean. Keep it respectful, as I always say. I always have to say it with Doctor Who videos. If you put in something abusive or sweary, it's just going to get deleted. No one's going to read it. So constructive criticism and comments, please. Right, thank you for watching. If you are new, by the way, like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. And I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.